So last weekend I was at a festival, and if you think this is hot, it was 38 degrees, so I couldn't stand in front of the stage very long, so I needed some motivation to get going. And that's where I learned that audience interaction is the best way to get everyone going again, forget about the heat. So first question, are you feeling hot? Oh man, I actually learned something about this sentence. I used to say to colleagues when they asked me, like, how are you doing? And the weather was very warm outside. I used to tell them, I'm hot, which basically means that I'm very good looking, which probably my wife thinks is true. But my colleague at one point looked at me and he was like, what were you saying? You're hot? Oh, okay, it's you're feeling hot. So that's where I learned something from the English language, that first of all, if everyone would ever ask you if you're feeling hot or how you're feeling, how's the temperature, then just say feeling hot. But talking about hot, one thing I learned today sitting in the audience is that the sessions here are very hot, the content. I was really impressed by all the things there, all the hacking going on, the vulnerabilities, especially in the product that I'm part of developing, so that's cool to see. And then I was thinking, yeah, I'm here, NDA things, stuff, hacking, I cannot talk about that. So what can I do to make this session a little bit more exciting? Because I'm just gonna bore you for an hour with marketing stuff, so I basically deleted all my slides and put in one slide, and I'm very happy to see that multiple people turned up, because we're gonna need you for the next hour. Because one thing I'm a big fan of is doing karaoke. So I thought, let's do karaoke. So who wanna join me on stage? I love to sing Britney Spears. I actually have a special dance, which I'll only show you when I drink wine. Nobody? Anyone? No? I see one finger? Okay, sure, let's go into the content then. So today I'm here to talk about Azure AD native certificate-based authentication. And I think this is a funny topic because it's very old and very new. Because certificate-based authentication is something that has been around for a very long time. But we, as the Azure AD product group, decided, not interesting. Let's just keep it on-prem. We have it there, that's fine. But then a few customers started to complain, and a few customers were like, we want to get rid of ADFS because of reasons, a few reasons that you maybe learned in the previous session, that it could be a little dangerous while misconfigured. And the cool thing about ADFS is that you can configure it in 1 million ways, but you can also misconfigure it in 1 million ways. So this is the thing that we looked at and we're like, okay, cool, let's build something for native certificate-based authentication. And that's where I'm going to talk about. So we looked at who is using certificate-based authentication today. So we came up with a few reasons. There, we have one here. Smart card certificate authentication is required, which I think is a very broad statement, right? Required, who requires it? It's like I'm walking into a customer and saying, no, you require smart. No, there's a lot of government-issued things, and especially when I look at the German market, but also in the US, from a government perspective, there's a lot of places where smart card authentication and certificates are required from that angle. Single sign-on, oh, wait, there we go. It just went, that's the other button. Single sign-on scenarios on mobile devices used to be the case, right? It's something that now kind of got fixed. If you look into iOS, where you have enterprise SSO, where you don't require those type of scenarios anymore. Same goes for Android. It's getting all a little bit of mature. So for SSO, we can do different stuff. Like we can group client IDs together and just use PRTs to, no, just kidding. This was a session this morning. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend to look into it. Third-party MDM scenarios, and then basically what I said, audience interaction. Any other ways, anything you can think of, like why you're using certificates and smart cards? Yeah. Get rid of password. That's a very good one. Yeah, it's kind of the oldest way, right, to get rid of password, to do certificate-based authentication. And that's also how we see it as an extension in Azure AD. We have passwordless methods, and this talk is not about that, but this is a very common one, and a lot of companies already have deployed an infrastructure, a PKI infrastructure, and using certificates for authentication. Or basically, I know a lot of customers that only allow certificates to sign in, so no passwords anymore, which is, like, we're talking about passwordless a lot and FIDO and all those things, but already like 10 years ago, a lot of companies were already passwordless in that occasion. So how does it work today? Don't you like it? This is a very, very marketing type of slide. It's very high over, but I thought I'm not going to make this an ADFS deep dive. And actually, it's funny, I always like these type of things where the arrows don't really match because it's all coming from the user. But basically, how we do it today is with ADFS on-prem. That means you need an ADFS farm with all the hassle around it and security things that could happen due to misconfiguration. And then the user will go to a cloud workload or to Azure AD, or it goes directly to ADFS. Show the certificate, ADFS will issue a token, and then that will be used to Azure Active Directory to authenticate. It's basically like switching from one method to another. I have a smart card, which is an authentication method, and now I'm going to use SAML or WSFET, depending on how you have configured ADFS with Azure AD. What we see with a lot of customers using smart cards, they're like, we want to move to a more cloud-native setup. We're going to get rid of ADFS. First of all, it's expensive to maintain. Second of all, just say SolariGate, and you probably know a lot. There are security incidents with it, and it adds a lot of complexity. But until today, we didn't have a full solution to go get rid of ADFS. And there's still, and you can come to me afterwards and share your scenario, but there's still scenarios there that require ADFS. Third-party MFA is kind of one of them, but those are the things that we're looking into. So why are we looking into cloud-native certificate-based authentication? So first, unblock new and existing customers, reduce those costs, what I mentioned, and extending Azure AD to support CBA for all accounts. So even if you're going to cloud accounts, the support could be there. One thing I want to make clear for this solution is that this is about using an existing certificate. So the whole infrastructure of issuing those certificates is not part of this story. So let's dive into how this will work. And this is also a funny one, because we're ending over here, and we're starting over here. It's like a treasure hunt, right? So the user tries to access an app, and that app is federated to Azure Active Directory. So the user gets redirected to Azure AD for a sign-on, enter a username, and then it will ask for a certificate. Azure AD checks if certificate-based authentication is enabled, and the user selects a certificate to sign in with. Azure AD, what I said, requests the certificate. We validate the certificate, so checking the CRL, and then the user can provide a second factor, or we have indicated that this certificate also fulfills the MFA claim, and then Azure AD completes the sign-in. So there are a few extra steps in here.
Enabling CBA, is that a tenant-wide setting for everyone? Or is it possible to say, okay, I enable CBA, and then you do it, he does it, and somebody else uses password?
Yeah, so the question is if CBA is a tenant-wide setting. It's a tenant-wide setting, but you can restrict it to specific users that you want to use it. And actually going to show it in a bit on how to configure it, which is a great transition into my next slide, right? How to configure CBA in Azure AD. There you go. Thanks for the question. So let's start with the admin side, the exciting side, right? We don't care about users. We just want to do this fun stuff. As I learned that Azure AD is the fun part. So first of all, upload the trusted certificate, so root, intermediate, or the issuer certificate. We need to validate if this is a valid certificate that the user is using. Then we need to configure authentication bindings for all certificates, and we can also configure it as being a MFA certificate. And how that will work, we will show that in a bit. We need to configure some bindings. So we have a few options where you can do the username binding. Principal name to UPN is by default, but there are some other fields that you can use in the certificate to map the user to a specific certificate. And then enable certificate-based authentication. Those are basically the steps. Before I continue, I want to let you know that I know this audience loves things like PowerShell and scripts and all that type of stuff, but there are a lot out there that just want to use a GUI to do all kinds of things. As this is in public preview, there are a few things that are only possible through PowerShell on the admin side. And one of them is getting that trusted certificate authority in there. So basically, you upload the trusted certificate authority using PowerShell into Azure AD. So you can have multiple trusted authorities in there that can be checked. There's a few things here. I'm going to go through some limitations later as well that we currently have. But it's a start, right? We're getting somewhere. So there's a maximum size for the CRL, which need be set to be cached, and the maximum number of CAs added is currently limited to around 50. And this is basically a number that, like, we tried it until 50, and then we got tired of setting up all those PKI type of infrastructure. So it's probably around 50, and that's it. When we go GA, those will be hard numbers, right? When we're going to test it. This is what I said, still public preview stuff, so pretty new. Then you go to the authentication methods, where you will see a new entry, which will say certificate-based authentication, where you can enable this feature. So first upload those trusted CAs, and then enable the feature, and this is also where you can configure it. So if I go into this one, and this is what's answering your question, I can enable it, and I can target a specific set of users. So this is more also for pilot type of scenarios. One question that we also get around this selected group, like you're using ADFS today, so how am I going to move from ADFS to this setup without like disturbing my users, not doing it in a big bang? And this is something that is work in progress. So maybe you are familiar with the way of going from federated to managed, and it's the heat that made me forget what the name is of the feature. But you can set a selected set of users to a different authentication method. Sorry? Stage migration, thank you. So this, that will be part of that as well for the MFA certificates later in the future. Next to the basics, we also have a configure tab. When we go there, we can do all kinds of fun stuff. So first of all, this is the default setting. So that means you can add all kinds of different rules for different scenarios, for different CAs and different types of certificates. But this is the default fallback. So if there's no specific rule for this type of certificate or certificate issuer, it will fall back to this setting. If you look into the things you can configure, you can see we have the certificate field, which has a user attribute, and you can map principal name to a specific field, or the RFC 822 name field as well to a specific user attribute for matching. Let me check, yep. So you can add a specific rule, where you can add a specific certificate issuer or policy OID, which is an attribute in a certificate, and use that to identify if this certificate is being seen as a single-factor authentication or a multi-factor authentication. So after adding the rule, you will see it over here. What we currently support of the username bindings is mapping the send principal name to user principal name or on-premise user principal name, and the RFC 822 name also to user principal name and on-premises user principal name. One thing I would love to hear afterwards, if you're like, that's not useful to me, what is useful to you? So I can take that back as feedback while we're going through GA with our product, because that's basically how we develop our product. Based on that type of feedback, we know what to prioritize when we're building these things. Then you have, if you go back to the basics, here you have the selected user group. You press save, and it's there. So I didn't trust the demo gods today. So what I did is press the wrong button. Sorry, I need to get used to this thing. To show you how this would look from an admin configuration piece. So let me just run the video and talk you through what's happening here. If the video will play. Man, then you think, demo gods, they're not with me today. Now the video gods also hate me. And I cannot play, there we go, now it should get, there we go. So first you need to connect to Azure AD. That's what we're gonna do right here. So I have a beautiful username. There we go, that I'm gonna enter to sign into my account. I love typing without using my hands, right? There we go, magic. We're gonna sign in, and of course we're gonna enter a password, and we're signed in. If this was a real environment, you needed to do MFA, of course, because you all have enabled MFA for admins. So you can see that we're getting the Azure AD Trusted Certificate Authorities, and it's a pretty empty response that we're getting. So we're not there yet. So we're putting in some comments where we're getting the certificate, putting it in the specific format that we're looking for, and then add a new Azure AD Trusted Certificate Authority. Then after that, we're going to check if we did the right thing, and you will see that the Trusted Certificate Authority is there. So that's step one of the whole admin experience. The other one would be going into Azure AD and then to security, and then to authentication methods. And then under policies, you will find the certificate-based authentication. And these are the few steps that I just walked through. We can enable the feature for all users or those selected users, as I explained. We can add those users in groups. So let's search for the group MFA user, and then add those group, and let's add another group as well. This is the single factor user, and then select them, and we've added them, and we have a user with no certificate. Then we can configure the binding, so the single factor authentication under multi-factor authentication here. And this can be done, as I said, based on which certificate authority you're using, or based on the policy OID property in the certificate that can indicate if this is a certificate being seen of single or of multi-factor. So what it does in the end is that when you use a certificate, you get a token where the MFA claim is present, if it's an MFA certificate. If it's not, it will just issue a token without that MFA claim. And yes, when you use your certificate, and that certificate is being seen as single factor, and then you want to use it, and then you need to do MFA. We can do Azure MFA, or we can to add that MFA to it. But I will show you that in a bit. So this person that's typing a little bit slow today, but you can see that we have that certificate issuer here that is single factor, and then we say if the policy OID is 1234, let me read it for you because I know from experience from the back or even the front, it's pretty hard to read, we'll do multi-factor authentication. And that's it. So this is basically how you configure the certificate-based authentication in Azure AD. And as I said, the uploading of the certificate, that is something that is going to be a nice interface for that. So let's have a look at the end user experience. I know like we all care about the admin experience, but for some reason, end users are also important and want to have a great experience. And this is also something I tell customers, like it's always finding that balance between security and end user productivity. So you can see there's a new option, sign in with a certificate. And it will show you all the certificate on your system because we don't give a hint yet. That's going to be at GA. So then you can, Azure AD page will give you a hint, and it will only show up the relevant certificate instead of all the 15,000 certificates you, of course, installed yourself because some random article on the internet told you to. You can see the policy identifier in the certificate that we're going to use. So as you can see, this is an MFA user because it has that policy ID set to 1234. And then we will just sign into the My Apps page or Office Apps page in this case. So when we sign out, let's try it with a different user. And we're having trouble signing out. It's funny that this is in the video, right? You would say, let's cut out all the error messages. But this makes it extra special. And also, have you noticed that we're using Chrome? If marketing would see this, I would have that conversation like when I would tell that I'm hot, but then probably with someone from HR on that point. So sign in, sorry? No, this is being recorded. Oh, that's all fine. Man, I said some stuff on stage, you don't want to know, it all been recorded. Nobody watches the recording anyway. From our side, right? You should all watch it. Then the MFA user, so you can see, now you got me out of the story. Now it was ask you to do MFA, and you can trust me, I just pressed approve on my phone. I actually installed an app that auto-approve it, way easier than continuously just press that button. Just kidding, right? And now we're signed in with a user without MFA. If we're going to an MFA user with no certificate, that's going to be an exciting exercise. Come on, press it. No, we're not going to do this. So this is the end user experience on how that looks signing in with a certificate. Pretty similar to what you've been used to doing with ADFS, but there are a few things that we still need to work on. So, revocation. So currently only CRL is supported. So all you people with the OCSP, did the right letters? Awesome. Too bad for you. The CRL is cached, but that's not a very new thing, right? On your machine, CRLs are also cached for a specific amount of time. We do have a challenge. The challenge for your server presenting the CRL is it need to be downloaded in 10 seconds. Or for the network, yeah. So that's just host your CRL somewhere on an Azure server. You will be fine. It's like Azure websites is free, so just put it on there. There's currently no check on the trust chain. So if your root got compromised, too bad for you, certificates are still valid. That means right now that if that happens, first of all, maybe you should have asked someone to build your PKI infrastructure that knows like how to protect the root CA. But next to that, you need to revoke all certificates in this case to do so, or remove that certificate authority from Azure AD. So that's on the revocation part. And one other part I think is important, also to monitor like what's happening, is logging of what's happening. So there are some specific entries in the log that will show you like someone signed in with a single factor. Right now, when you're going to try this out, you will see two events here. The username will show up as a GUID. It's not a bug, it's a feature. That's something that's gonna be fixed before we're gonna GA this, and then the username will just show up there. You can also look into the details and where you can see that someone signed in with a certificate. So all this information is available. It will also tell you if it's true, if it succeeded, and here you can see this has been a certificate which is only valid for a single factor, because there's a MFA claim going afterwards. So here's where MFA is requested. We have some additional information as well. So we give you information about what's in the certificate. So it's very small, I'm sorry, but we have the user certificate subject, user certificate issuer, serial number, thumbprint, valid from expiration, the user's certificate subject name, and the root key type, which I think is brilliant in this one. It's unknown. So if we're going to look into what are the current supported scenarios, anyone here signing into Windows with a smart card or certificate? Nobody? Man, you are in luck, because that's not supported. So let's have a look at what is supported. I actually had... is it me or the clicker? There we go. Supported scenarios. So currently support sign-in to web browser-based applications on all platforms. User sign-ins on mobile native browsers. And there's support for some rules, like what I said, the multi-factor authentication are based on the subject and policy IOD. And you can configure the user to certificate to user account bindings using the certificate alternate name and the RFC 822 name. So I've been talking about a lot of things that we don't have, so what is actually coming, right? So currently we have the public preview, which is announced in February 2022. So I don't think I have to talk you through the capabilities, right? I think I showed everything that we got. That's it. But I think it's a cool feature also to try out, or to see if there's a flaw in it. I'm already waiting for those tweets like, oh, we found something in this specific cert endpoint which you need to fix. And that's great feedback, because then we can fix it before we go GA with the product, and it's a very secure product before that. The announcement says early fall 2022. Yeah, could be. Probably, yeah, around that time, probably it will be, but it's not a set in stone date. So don't, let's say, put something in place that requires that in fall 2022. But we're doing our utmost best to get it ready in fall 2022, when it's not this hot anymore, hopefully. What's coming? So the CRL size limit, we're going to remove that. Also the maximum number of CAs. So right now, someone at the office is installing more PKI environments, so we can test it above 50 and tell you if it works. Support for native CBA as a second factor. So what I've showed you right now is basically all first factor, right? Entering username, asking for a certificate, and then that certificate is either single or multi-factor. What we mean with second factor basically means you can use it as an MFA method. So instead of sending a push notification to a phone after a user signs in with the first method, we can request a certificate. So the portal support for trusted issuer configuration is basically you don't need to do PowerShell anymore. You can now just go to the portal and upload that certificate of that trusted CA. Things like support for non-routable suffix, which I think is important for customers that have that. That's a good one, right? .local, there's still a lot of domains with .local around there. It was funny how once upon a time, we told customers, you should use .local. And now we're like, maybe not a smart idea, because everyone can now request a top-level domain name, although .local is on the block list. But who knows, at some point they're going to release it. And then it's going to be fun with those things. I once had a customer that used a domain name for their Active Directory, which was a domain name owned by someone else. The funky stuff you see then, that's totally cool. User mappings, there are going to be some new user mappings, and the Windows sign-in support, which you all don't care about because you don't use it. But I do know there are a lot of customers that are looking into that. Like we're only using, like the scenario where you only use it as a certificate to go passwordless, is one of the scenarios where you want to sign into your machine with that certificate as well. And then the support for the CBA stage rollout. So what I said, moving from ADFS to this funky new awesome cloud stuff in steps instead of in one big bang, which I know a lot of customers are looking for. Okay, yeah, there isn't very much else to talk about if it comes to the certificate-based authentication, which we're putting in there. So right now in public preview, I see one question already. Right now in public preview, somewhere in the future, it will go GA. So I saw one question here.
So this looks remarkably similar to certificate-based authentication for Active Sync for Exchange Online. We noticed there a lot of the commands are the same, and is this going to converge into one solution?
That is the plan.
Okay, but there's no time plan at the moment.
No, not right now, but that's definitely a good one. What you said, the Active Sync one is one of the few cloud endpoints that can do.
It's completely flawed, actually.
Yeah. So, so no, it's not like what I showed on the roadmap. That's basically what's coming. And all other things are on consideration. Actually, I haven't seen anything about that topic on the near roadmap. But that's good feedback, so thanks.
So probably you should look into the issue that you can use a certificate for code signing, for example, to log on to Active Sync. This is probably a flaw that you got in your solution as well.
Probably, yeah. No, I don't know.
Check it.
We're going to check that. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, you were talking about certificate-based authentication as a second factor also. My question, will it be possible to have this second factor as a conditional access policy?
So basically, this will be one of the options that you can use as a second factor when it's requested. So in a conditional access policy, you can do some kind of step-up authentication, right? You can say you sign in with one factor, and then this specific app or part of the app requires a second factor. Basically, what happens right now is that if I'm a user and I have multiple second factor things configured, I have a default one which is configured, but I do have other options. So basically, this is going to be one of the options that you can pick from as a second factor.
Very useful. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, actually some questions, I think. Will that integrate somehow into Kerberos in Azure AD, which is being built currently?
Yep. So basically it could integrate, because what the Kerberos for Azure AD will do is after you authenticate, you can get a limited TGT to Kerberos. And basically what this does is just one of the ways to authenticate. So theoretically, I would be able to sign in with a certificate and then use the Kerberos for Azure AD service to get a limited TGT, which I can use. So yes, to be honest, I need to check if this is going to be, like, the fun thing is sometimes things are technically possible, but they're not supported. So this is one of those scenarios, right, where we need to see if this is a supported scenario, even though it's going to be technically possible.
Regarding to targeting groups, are there any limitations using either on-prem synced groups or Azure AD dynamic groups?
You can use all of those groups, yeah. So you can use synced groups or Azure AD groups. So they're both list up when you go into there.
And just to confirm, but because maybe I missed it, but I will have the option to enforce the user to use this CBA, because without I'm not getting rid of the password.
Yeah, so very, very good question. The next stuff I'm gonna tell is either gonna come or not, or maybe we're working on it or maybe not, but it could be possible that we're working on a feature that will allow you to force a specific authentication method in a conditional access rule. It basically means that I can target a specific set of applications and say you can only do CBA. What was the other part? Sorry, this is one?
If I cannot force this authentication method, the user will always have a password.
Yeah, oh, that was the other one. So you've seen that beautiful authentication methods pane with all that whole list of methods. Maybe, possibly, probably, password would be one of the methods there, and there's a beautiful enable switch which you can disable. No, but just to give you an example, if you look at the Microsoft account, so the consumer account, we already have the possibility to disable your password, and that's basically the first step of fully getting rid of those passwords. So the next step for us would be doing the same the possible next step. This is always difficult. I'm used to talk to like audiences when there is an NDA in place, so then I'm like, I just tell you everything. Otherwise, give me a few wine tonight, I will probably tell you everything. But you can probably disable the password. No, that's our goal, right? If you, for example, if you've seen the Apple keynote where they announced the passkey, which is basically FIDO2, having that on, basically having your phone as being a FIDO2 device is so powerful. So first of all, integration of that, yes, looking into, and then getting rid of the whole password all along. I can give you a little bit of insight on what we did in our own division. And actually, that was 1.5 years ago, when it was all still in public preview, the passwordless authentications. Actually, I was part of the group where they just generated a random hash set that as my password, didn't tell me, and then I could only use passwordless methods to sign in. I can tell you, in those 1.5, I don't even know, I think it's actually longer. It was even before all the pandemic stuff. I've never used my password. Even though there's something there, it's so random and so long until you reach the maximum amount of stuff you can put into the password field, but that's a different discussion. That it's pretty easy. But yeah, getting rid of it, just removing the whole field, I've maybe seen the specs, is something that will probably come in the future. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, so maybe kind of a comments. So I've been actually studying this from the attacker point of view, and just a couple of things. So first of all, the CLR part is optional now in this preview, so you don't need to put there anything. And you know, admins are quite lazy, and if that takes like more than 10 seconds, they can just omit that, and everything works, but you can't revoke anything. And if we compare this to ADFS attacks, this is actually kind of better from the attacker point of view, because now you need to only know the UPN. So if you can get the certificate that you create to make those user certificates, it's easier for them. However, as you said, that only works for like web clients, so you can't get access tokens from the backend as you could do with certificates. So that's a kind of a safer method, at least currently. But I'm very much looking forward to the things you showed on the roadmap. And by the way, I have the NDA, so we can talk about.
Oh yeah, that's good. We can talk in private. And by the way, all this stuff I just showed, except the stuff that I said that's not there, is in public preview. So it's in every tenant right now. On the like optional type of thing, we did put preview behind the text that it is a preview. But I can tell you, if you ever configured conditional access and notice that there are so many warnings, don't lock yourself out, all that type of stuff, there's a good reason those warnings are there, because we had around 20 to 30 support cases each month of customers that locked themselves out of the tenant because they configured a conditional access policy that would say all users, all apps, and block, and then some condition like, I don't know, make something up, you could say like, or use identity protection. Say if it's a middle, what is it, low, medium, there you go, medium risk, then block everyone. And then something happened and they locked themselves out of their tenant. So yeah, but a good point on the warnings and things. I can tell you the reason why it's difficult is that we need to work with the Azure portal framework, and that has standard components that are not always fully suitable for what we're looking for to implement those type of things. So that's a challenge always to make it as good as possible. But now we have the Entra portal. I haven't even talked about Entra. We can talk about Entra tonight. You had a question. Right?
Was there another question?
I thought you had a question? Oh, no, okay.
It's more a comment. So having no AADCS, Microsoft has a good reason to continue the support for on-prem AD.
The support for on-prem AD?
Yeah.
There's on-prem AD will be there for a long time. There's no deprecation whatsoever being announced. And I don't think to be honest, it's not something we can do currently, because right now there's no officially supported way in converting a synced user to a cloud user. So there's no migration path going to full cloud. So that's one thing we're first going to fix, or we've been trying to fix for a long time. And there's no date, there's no end date to it. I was almost going into, but there's nothing. Even internally, this Active Directory will be there. Yes, all the features, all the new funky stuff will be in Azure Active Directory or any other Entra product. But it will be there, it will be supported, security patches, everything will come out. There's still a team that's working on that and making sure that all those things are in place. So the reason I was laughing, because once at a customer meeting, I was talking about Kerberos as being a legacy protocol, and then it took me an hour to explain that we're not going to get rid of Kerberos anytime soon. So that's why I was a little bit careful, but no end date, nothing there, going to be supported, so yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering, this looks like a very good opportunity for a rogue admin to impersonate all your users by loading up a self-made root certificate.
Yep.
And using this with the UPN that he just guesses to impersonate whoever. Are there any mechanisms to trigger alarms on actions on the certification?
Yeah, so adding the logging there I haven't shown, but adding a new root CA will trigger audit logging that something happened there. So you can monitor on that to prevent that. Because of course, like nowadays with the federation stuff, as an admin I can convert a domain to federated and then use my own generated certificate to set up the trust and just create tokens with the beautiful tool with Nestor created.
Yeah, just a short comment to this. Actually, the CBA is the only method that doesn't save that information on Azure AD object. Like, for instance, if you are using ADFS, you need to know the immutable ID, but here you don't. You can just create certificates to as any user, and you can like impersonate them. But that's just a comment. Then.
Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, I will take that. Any more questions, or does everyone want to go outside and have some fresh air? And a beer. Are there beers? No, it's awesome. Yeah, I noticed, but there's nobody behind it. And I've learned the hard way that if you try to do it yourself, it's not appreciated. So I try to refrain from that. Awesome. There, sorry? And I have access. Nice. Awesome. No more questions?
Then thank you very much for the entertaining talk.
Thank you.